coming through those tunnels and sacrificing their own people. So my question to you is, what is your perspective on Hamas as leadership, as a government in Gaza? And what is the plight for the Palestinian people in view of that?
Certainly, and despite being out of Gaza for many years, like I said, my immediate and extended family were there. I tried to build an internationally run Israeli-approved airport in Gaza in 2015. I have contacts and networks there and feel that I can speak from experience and actual data. And the truth is, while Hamas does in fact have a base of support that I personally would not put beyond 30%, a large number of the people of Gaza, including those who once upon a time supported Hamas, are furious with what the group has done for almost 2 decades in terms of getting a blockade imposed upon Gaza due to their strategic choices, aligning with Iran, the stealing of a lot of the Palestinian people's resources, the embedding of militant assets throughout the civilian population. That is an open secret, something that is known to the NGOs and the UN and the international community that for years, through good intentions, inadvertently enabled Hamas to entrench its control. The people of Gaza protested against Hamas in 2017 and 2019. In 2023, in July and August, right before October 7th, the people of Gaza understand that Hamas does have its infrastructure and tunnels to take care of its people, and it's stealing aid and it's stealing the supplies while they have to fend for themselves above ground. The unfortunate reality, nevertheless, is that you look at people why aren't the people in Russia and in Iran and in Belarus and in North Korea, why aren't they rising up and overturning their regimes? The reality is when you have a battered, beaten population that is also suffering from Israeli policies, also suffering from the war, but is also unarmed. And it's a combination of brainwashing, it's a combination of control, it's not a democratic society. It's very difficult to speak out. I'm in the West, I'm in the United States, and it's immensely challenging for me as somebody who holds multiple truths and balances and tries to have empathy for my own people as I'm also building bridges with Israeli and Jewish communities. Imagine how exponentially difficult that is in Gaza. And so I don't want to, my intention isn't to manufacture dissent where none exists, but it is an absolute fact that the Western media has done a horrible job of highlighting dissident voices in Gaza. There is this implicit desire almost to paint all Gazans as being behind Hamas. And by the way, and I wrote about this on Twitter, even people that normally support the resistance and the armed resistance narrative, I talked to Palestinians one-on-one who confided in me how they're absolutely horrified by the taking of women and children and how that, as hostages, the treatment of even of those soldiers we saw in this video. What we didn't see in this video was a Hamas fighter bragging that these are our sabaya, which is Islamist doctrine for sex slaves. So there are many in Gaza and throughout the Palestinian territories and the diaspora, like I said, who despise Hamas, who stand against them, but they're fragmented, they're afraid, they are unable to speak out. And that's my hope, is to create a new political home where you can be supportive of our people's just and urgent aspirations for independence and peace and statehood, while also being against Hamas and Islamism.
Thank you so much. My next question is to you, Stephen. Iran and its primary proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, are a major threat to Israel and the United States, and in fact, the entire world. What are the current threats from Iran and its proxies?
Well, thank you for having me here. Iran, a wonderful country, wonderful cultured people, unfortunately under the rule of a maniacal theocratic regime since 1979, racing toward nuclear weapons. And by the way, if the original Iran nuclear deal were still in effect, it would expire anyway next year because it expired in 2025. Racing for nuclear weapons, planting proxy groups to surround Israel with what Iran calls the so-called axis of resistance. Hezbollah in Lebanon, armed with over 100,000 missiles, rockets, cruise missiles that can strike any target from Haifa to Beersheba and everything in between. The Houthis in Yemen, armed with Iranian cruise missiles and drones, shooting at it a lot. By the way, Aqaba is right next to Eilat, and I understand unofficially that Aqaba has been saved from hits by Houthi missiles several times by the Israelis over the last few months. Iranian proxies in Iraq, right next door, in January of this year, attacked a United States military base in northeastern Jordan with drones, killing 3 U.S. service members and wounding 40, some of whom quite seriously. Is Iran a threat to Israel? Of course it is. Iran has sworn to destroy Israel. Iran saw the pieces on the chessboard, Daphna, the Abraham Accords, the negotiations last year that could have led to a deal between Saudi Arabia, Israel, the U.S., and the Palestinians, a package deal whereby the U.S. would enter into a defense pact with Saudi Arabia. The Israelis would recognize a path forward toward Palestinian statehood, and Saudi Arabia would normalize with Israel, establish diplomatic relations. The one party that did not want that to happen was Iran. And the Wall Street Journal reported shortly after October 7th that it was Iran that gave the green light to Hamas to commit these horrific crimes on October the 7th. Who has benefited from this war more than any other country? It's Iran. Iran is a threat to Israel, and Iran is also a threat to American interests. And by the way, and I'll stop here, Daphna, Iran launched hundreds of missiles and drones in Israel just a couple of months ago. We all remember that night, that horrible night. The first ever direct Iranian attack against Israel. What if one of those rockets had pierced through the Iron Dome and struck the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem? You know who would have been blamed. Not Iran. They would have said the Israelis did it. We came very close to World War III that night. That is why the United States of America is equally under threat from Iran. This is an issue that has got to be dealt with, Daphna.
Thank you. You know, one of the questions obviously on everybody's mind is Israel is being attacked from the north, and it's always in threat of Hamas now from every direction. So what do you think is the reality in the very near future?
Daphna, I've been in Israel twice in the last 8 weeks. The mood, as many of you who have been there will verify, is very bleak. The fate of the hostages is hanging over the country every minute of every day. And while I was there, and I've been there more than 40 times in my life, I have a huge family there, for the first time I heard some of my military friends, military relatives, genuinely worried about a Hezbollah massive strike on the center of Tel Aviv, on the center of Haifa, on the heavily populated areas of Israel. The threat of a Hezbollah attack launching thousands of rockets simultaneously, which Hamas proved on October the 7th when they launched 5,000 rockets simultaneously and overwhelmed portions of the Iron Dome. What if Hezbollah were to fire 25,000 or 30 or 40,000? How many thousands of dead would we have in the populated central portion of Israel? For the first time in my life, I heard grave, grave worry about that possibility. That's different from what we had in June of 1967. It's different from what we had in October of 1973 because the very heart of Israel's civilian population is under threat. People are quite worried about that, Daphna.
Arthur brought Khomeini to Iran. Stupid American policy. Please talk about it. You guys think whatever happened in the Middle East, we have to blame you.
Excuse me, sir, could I continue with the questions? I really appreciate your patience. Thank you. My next question is, obviously, this is very emotional for so many people around the world. But through it all, everything that we've seen on television, on media, something horrific has been growing, which is anti-Semitism. and actually increased racism as well. My question is to you, Roz. You've been working with all the universities, trying to educate people and students and professors against any kind of racism and any kind of discrimination and anti-Semitism. Please explain, what is this, what is happening here? What is going to happen, and what do we do about it?
I think, first of all, thank you, Daphna, for putting the evening together and for everything you've done. Thank you, Rabbi Barron, for hosting. And thank you for having me on the helm. I think we can all see and read about the encampments and the reaction to October 7th, which was unexpected, really. We watched the film, we got a glimpse of what happened, and so everybody thought Jewish students would return to college campuses after the holidays, after October 7th, and maybe be supported. And when they returned, unfortunately, they got a very big, bad surprise. There was not only non-support, but there were rallies that were, promoting Hamas. There were flags, Hamas flags, and Hezbollah flags, and then the encampments, and a lot of discrimination against Jewish students and Israeli students. So not only did they not get the kind of support that one might predict, but they got quite the opposite. And statements like resistance, terrorism is not resistance. So, I'm sorry, terrorism, resistance is not terrorism. Thank you. And so resistance is not terrorism.